When to be feared versus loved. A modern guide for leaders. Most people try too hard to be liked. They avoid conflict, avoid consequences, avoid saying no. And slowly, people stop respecting them. Machiavelli understood a brutal truth about leadership. A person who fears losing approval eventually loses authority, because kindness without strength becomes weakness, and leadership without consequences becomes meaningless. In today's world, fear does not mean violence or cruelty. It means standards, boundaries, discipline, and consequences people know are real. Because the leaders who are respected the most are usually the ones who cannot be emotionally manipulated. Part 1. The danger of needing to be liked. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked by everyone around them. They avoid conflict, avoid difficult conversations, and constantly sacrifice authority in order to maintain approval. They say yes when they should say no. They tolerate disrespect to appear nice. They become emotionally dependent on being accepted socially. But Machiavelli understood something dangerous about leadership and human behavior. The moment people realize there are no consequences for disrespecting you, your authority begins collapsing. This is why many kind-hearted leaders eventually become ignored, manipulated, or emotionally exhausted. Their desire to be loved becomes greater than their willingness to enforce standards. And once that happens, people stop respecting boundaries completely. Machiavelli famously questioned whether it is better for a leader to be feared or loved. His answer was not about cruelty. It was about control, stability, and authority. Because human beings often take kindness for weakness, when kindness is not supported by strength. A leader obsessed with approval becomes emotionally controlled by the opinions of others. But a leader capable of enforcing consequences creates respect. And without respect, leadership eventually becomes powerless. Part 2. Why people test your boundaries. Human beings constantly test boundaries, whether consciously or unconsciously. In workplaces, friendships, relationships, and leadership environments, people observe how much behavior they can get away with before consequences appear. This is why emotionally weak leaders often lose authority slowly rather than suddenly. At first, people arrive late occasionally. Then, deadlines become ignored. Then, standards disappear completely. Why? Because people adapt to whatever behavior leadership tolerates. Machiavelli understood that authority without consequences becomes meaningless. If someone knows there is no real cost for disrespecting your standards, they stop taking those standards seriously. This is why strong leadership requires controlled firmness, not emotional aggression, not cruelty, but certainty, calm authority, clear boundaries, and visible consequences when boundaries are violated. Many people confuse being respected with being liked, but they are not the same thing. People may like someone emotionally while secretly ignoring them completely. But genuine respect creates behavioral discipline, and behavioral discipline is what maintains order in leadership environments. Part 3. Love without strength becomes weakness. Machiavelli did not reject kindness. What he rejected was weak leadership disguised as kindness. Many leaders believe being endlessly understanding makes them good people. But when understanding removes accountability, systems eventually collapse. This happens everywhere. Businesses, friendships, teams, relationships, and even families. A manager who constantly excuses poor performance eventually loses control of the workplace. A parent who never enforces discipline eventually loses authority over their children. A friend who tolerates endless disrespect eventually becomes emotionally drained and undervalued. Human beings naturally push against weak boundaries because weakness invites testing. This is why love without strength eventually becomes vulnerability. Machiavelli understood that people respect leaders who are fair but firm. Leaders who can remain calm while still enforcing consequences. Because authority without discipline becomes emotional chaos. The strongest leaders are not emotionally reactive, but they are also not emotionally passive. They understand that maintaining order sometimes requires discomfort, difficult conversations, and strategic firmness. Otherwise, kindness slowly transforms into weakness. Part 4. Fear in the modern world does not mean terror. When Machiavelli spoke about fear, many people misunderstand his meaning completely. He was not encouraging cruelty or abuse. Modern leadership fear is not about intimidation through violence. It is about consequences, standards, and psychological certainty. In today's world, feared leaders are often simply leaders who cannot be manipulated emotionally. They enforce expectations consistently, they protect boundaries calmly, and they remain emotionally controlled under pressure. People know exactly where the line exists with them. This creates stability. In workplaces, employees often respect leaders who remain disciplined and consistent, more than leaders constantly seeking friendship and approval. Why? Because consistency creates trust in authority. A leader who changes standards emotionally becomes unpredictable and weak. But a leader who calmly enforces standards creates psychological order. This is why respected authority often feels intimidating, even without aggression. Calm certainty itself creates pressure. People naturally become more disciplined around individuals who clearly value standards, self-respect, and accountability. And this is the modern version of fear Machiavelli understood. Respect supported by visible consequences. Part 5. The problem with trying to be everyone's friend. One of the fastest ways to lose authority is trying to become everyone's friend. Many leaders, managers, and socially insecure people constantly seek emotional closeness with everyone around them because they fear rejection. But leadership and friendship often require different psychological dynamics. The moment someone becomes overly emotionally accessible, enforcing standards becomes more difficult. Why? Because emotional attachment weakens objectivity. People begin avoiding difficult conversations in order to protect approval. They stop correcting bad behavior because they fear conflict. And eventually, leadership disappears entirely. Machiavelli understood that emotional distance can sometimes protect authority. This does not mean becoming cold or antisocial. It means understanding that leadership requires boundaries. The strongest leaders are often respected more than they are emotionally loved because their decisions are guided by principles rather than emotional dependence. Many people secretly resent weak leadership because weak leadership creates disorder, confusion, and inconsistency. But disciplined leadership creates clarity. People may not always emotionally enjoy strict standards, but deep down, they often trust them more than emotional instability disguised as kindness. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked by everyone, but powerful leaders understand something different. Respect lasts longer than approval. Discipline lasts longer than emotion. And boundaries create authority. Because people may temporarily like weak leadership, but deep down, they trust strength more. If you want more videos about power, leadership, stoicism, psychology, and Machiavelli's harsh truths, watch the next video on your screen now. Because in a world full of emotional weakness, calm authority becomes dangerous.